Now is the exciting part. Let's move forward and make some candles. But first, I need to suit up. Ta-da! Ideally, I want to wear a lab coat because that'll keep my clothes as well as my skin away from harsh chemicals. However, because this is my home lab and I know the chemicals that I'm going to be using is just wax and some fragrance, pretty much I'm okay. The apron, however, is going to help me from not staining my own clothes. Eee, I'm so excited! Let's go! Ne réfléchis pas trop, la vie est courte, mon amour. Ne réfléchis pas trop. Hi, my name is Nikki Vo, and welcome to my lab. I'm a seasoned chemist with over 20 years of experience developing successful innovations and climbing that corporate ladder. However, at the age of 47, I realized I'm no longer living life on my terms. So in this channel, I'm bringing all that knowledge from the past 20 years into this channel and rediscovering who I am and building the life that I've always wanted. My goal is to share that knowledge with you so that you too can redefine your life and build the life that you've always wanted. So come join me on this journey and hit the subscribe button. And together, let's build an amazing life. Okay, let's prepare the wax. I'm going to start off with the paraffin wax, make this in 2 different batches so I can make 3 candles per batch, and then I will migrate to the other waxes. For this video, I'm only going to share you how I prepare the paraffin wax, but just know that with the other waxes, it's going to be very, very similar. The only difference is with the soy waxes, they come in flakes, so I don't actually need to cut the wax. It's already made in flakes, easy to pour, easy to measure out. With the paraffin and the paraffin soy wax blend, they come in slabs. So I'm going to need to prepare this. I'm going to open up the bag, grab a slab, and I'm wearing gloves as well as putting it on top of freezer paper. The freezer paper is waxy, so I can always scrape off any wax that does not come off, as well as wearing gloves because this is going to be super waxy and I don't want it on my fingers. I'm going to take a knife, cut it down. What's really nice is that this wax is fairly easy to work with. It's a little thick, so it's going to require a little bit of arm work to get it to go. And then I'm going to put it into my digital scale, tare that with the bowl on top, and I need to measure this in ounces. So let's move the units. Right now it's on kg, grams, pounds, or ounces. Ounces. Okay. Actually, there we go. Pounds and ounces. So the other ounces is the liquid form. The pound ounces is going to be in the solid form. That's 1.8 ounces. We need a total of 10 ounces. Remember the calculation? So let's move out to 10. The other thing you might want to do as you're doing this, it's not that big of a deal because this wax seems to be very soft, so I don't know if it's going to take a long time to melt. However, with some waxes, maybe. Again, I don't test a lot of wax, but maybe that sometimes the wax is going to be a little bit harder and therefore harder to melt. So one thing that you could do to help it along and melt faster is cut it into smaller chunks, and that way it can melt faster. 8 ounces, a little bit more. And 9.6. 10.1. I'm going to take a little bit out. $10 even. Yay! All right. Gonna wipe my knife onto the wax. Take my glove, wipe extra wax off, and then put that wax back into the bag. Put that wax and put it back into the bag. Now I'm going to save this wax paper and knife for later when I do the second batch, but for now just know that I'm done. Seal that up. All right, now it's time to melt the wax. Take the wax that I just weighed out, set it to the recommended temperature for melting. For this paraffin wax from the vendor, it said, again, the reason why I write everything down is I can always go back and reference what I wrote down. For the Pro Blend 400 paraffin wax, I need to melt it between 180 to 185 Fahrenheit, and then my pour point is going to be 10 degrees lower at 165 to 175. So let's bump up the temperature from 180 to 185. Fahrenheit when. Okay, so I set it to 185 Fahrenheit. I think traditionally a lot of candle makers will use a double boiler, which tends to be a softer warming unit. However, I don't honestly know how to use a double boiler, and when I have used it, maybe I'm impatient or whatever, but I tend to burn whatever I'm using the double boiler for. So I opted for the digital warmer and pot pourer because that way I can control the temperature here very precisely by 1 degree in increments, and I don't have to worry about it overheating or overboiling. Now, as it's warming up, I want to put my wax in the bowl. Oh, I already am feeling it. Oh, you can start to see it's warming up very quickly. As you can see some of the smoke very, very quickly. Put that in, cover it up. That way it gives that heat in that pot to allow the top part and the sides of that wax to melt down fully. While I'm doing that, I'm going to put my digital thermometer in that supplied hole so I can measure the actual temperature of the wax. Now, sometimes when we set temperatures, it's going to be what we desire. However, it doesn't exactly mean that's what the wax temperature is going to be. I see this a lot when I do experiments in the chemistry lab. Is I will set a hot plate temperature, and what I actually measure is off by a few degrees. And what's critical when it comes to a reaction is what's actually happening in that mixture or in that reaction, not what we set the temperature to be. So always smart, put a digital thermometer, measure it, read the temperature on the thermometer. If it's off by a few degrees, bump up the temperature in your pot. However, if everything is actually working the way it should be, they should match. The other thing I want to use the digital thermometer for is later on I'm going to pour it into the jars, and I need to make sure that wax is 10 degrees lower in Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Fahrenheit lower, so that when I do pour it, it's not going to be too hot to pour. Now, what I read is there are issues when your pour temperature isn't correct, whether it's too high or too low. So you can have cratering, you can have sinkholes and that sort of thing. And the vendor recommends you kind of play around with the temperatures to figure out what's the best pour point for the wax. That's something we can do in a future experiment. But for now, I'm just going to stick to that temperature that was recommended, pour it, and that way I can tell whether this wax or the other wax is easy to handle. Speaking of which, that comes to our very first measurement. How easy is it to use this wax? Now, it would be a difficult wax to use if it was really hard to cut, and it takes a lot of different utensils or even my muscles, which, I've got a lot of them. If it uses a lot of my muscles to cut that wax. However, this wax was very easy to cut through. But It is not like flake wax where I can just scoop it in, pour it directly into the pot. I actually had to cut it a little bit. And so for ease of use, I'm going to give it a rating of 2. Not too difficult, but also not super easy. It's a rating of 2. I'm going to write that down as well as what I exactly did here into my lab notebook. So procedure, step 1. Obtained, the wax is called Pro Blend 400 paraffin wax slab form. Then cut into smaller chunks and weighed on tiered digital scale to 10.0 ounces. Then transferred weighed wax to wax pot and warmed to 185 degrees Fahrenheit. Placed digital thermometer in wax and measured wax temperature. Okay. Evaluated ease of use, and that gives a 2 rating because it was easy to cut but requires cutting. All right, now let's take a look at preparing the jars. We're going to wait for the wax to melt. I'm going to need new gloves. Grab my jars. There's 3 of them. Now, one mistake you might make is you don't prepare the jar. That's important because if there is a layer of dust or oil or some other film on the inside of that jar, it's not going to have the right adhesion for that wax to stick to the candle, stick to that jar. And so you're going to see gaps and the appearance isn't going to be great. If you have a color jar, that's going to give you a lot of forgiveness. But one of the reasons why I use a clear jar is because I wanted to see how well do these wax stick to the jar. If I don't clean up the jar and prepare them, I don't know if that adhesion is going to be because of the wax or because I didn't actually clean and prepare the jar. So I'm going to clean and prepare the jar, take out that variable. I know if I clean it and prepare it well, that if it doesn't adhere to the jar, it's going to be because of the wax. So to clean and prepare the jar, I'm going to need isopropyl alcohol. You can get this at the local convenience store or grocery store. It's going to be called, oops, wrong one. It's going to be called either isopropyl alcohol or rubbing alcohol. I think rubbing alcohol is 70%. This is 91%. It really doesn't matter. The part that's critical is that it has alcohol in it, and that's what's going to help clean the inside of the jar up. Let me grab some cotton. Take your cotton swab, put some alcohol on it, and then take that swab and clean the inside of that jar. Both the walls, the little lip, as well as the bottom. Now, one thing you might want to be very careful of is leaving too much lint in that jar. So after you allow the isopropyl alcohol or rubbing alcohol to dry off, you want to inspect your jar, and it looks good to go, then you can move forward. If not, and there's still some lint, take a dry paper towel or something that is going to help you make your jar lint-free and wipe the lint off. Okay. Now, I didn't do 6 jars. I didn't prepare them. I could, but I'm going to wait until I do the next batch to prepare my jars. All right, dry paper towel. I look at it, it's slightly dry. I can see some lint, so I'm going to wipe it down further, get rid of that lint. Now I checked my wax. It's very clear. The set temperature on the pot is 185. However, the digital thermometer shows me 194. What that means is that My pot is a little bit hotter than what I set it to. That's okay. As long as it's slightly hotter, it's good to go. Now what I need to do is I'm going to lower the temperature on here so that my pour temperature is going to be, what is it for Paraffin Pro Blend 400? My pour point is 165 to 175, and it's currently that turned off. It's currently 195, so I need to lower that temperature by 20 degrees. Okay, so I set the temperature lower to 165, and I'm going to wait for that to cool off a little bit. Meanwhile, make sure this is all lint-free. Okay, looking good for the most part. Hopefully I did a good enough job. All right, set that aside. Now what I want to do is I want to place my stickers. You can just go ahead and put it in. However, if you're much like me and you're a scientist and you want to do this right, you might want to put a dot in the center that will guide you on where to put the sticker. Let's do that real quick. I'm going to take my ruler, measure the center of that. So 7.5, right there. Okay, so it looks like the center is in between the two letters 26. So I'm going to put the sticker in the middle of that number. I've read somewhere that there are other methods to place your wick. One of them being you just apply a little dab of wax and then put in there. However, some things I don't mind cheating. Actually, I think the better way to do this is put it on your wick and then put the wick with the sticker in. Not exactly sure. So if you are very advanced and know how to make candles and you have a great method for putting the wick in the jar, please let me know. I would love to learn from you. Put it in the comments. Thank you. All right, so as I mentioned before, I have 4 different wicks that I'm going to try. However, for this experiment, what I realized is that some of these wicks are not the right size. I, for whatever reason, chose an equal 12. I'm not sure why. That's going to be for a 3 to 3.5 diameter candle. So my best bet is to use a CD8 or an equal 2. There is the Premier that I can use. However, I'm going to use what is recommended for the wax. And later on, when I explore the different wicks, I'm going to try different wick sizes as well as wick types to see what's the best wick for that particular wax. But my very first experiment, I want to learn what's the best wax to use. So for the paraffin, I want to try the CD8s. Again, if you have a great way of putting these wicks together, please let me know. All right, put this on here like that. Press it down, make sure it's nice and good. Take off this other layer and then drop it right in the center like that, okay? And then take a pointy stick or your pen and just press it down further just to make sure it's nice and good. All right, there we are. Put the other 2 on. The temperature on the digital thermometer dropped from 195 to 185, so I still have 10 more degrees to wait for. Now, what happens if you don't center your wick? Well, if you decide to keep it as is and you don't center it, you burn that candle, it's not going to burn very evenly. You're going to have portions of that wax that's not going to be burned. It's not going to be a great candle. However, if you want to make sure it burns really well, I would take off the wick and hopefully that sticker will go with it. If not, you're going to have to take tweezers or something else and pry off that sticker from the bottom of the candle and do it over again. Okay, now I want to put my wick centerer. So with the wick centering device, they have 2 guides to put either on the interior or the exterior of the jar. This will help guide your wick to make sure it's centered. There are different markings on this so that you can see where it's centered, making sure it's evenly spaced on both sides. So thread the wick through, don't attach it just yet, just thread it through the center. Place the centering device, making sure that it is equally spaced on both sides, and then hold the centering device down. Meanwhile, you want to pull that wick through, and it should hold that taut just like that. All right, let me finish the other 2 wicks. I'm going to leave that over here for now. Now, one thing I forgot to do, which is something I had noted down in my lab notebook, but I'm going to do this as soon as I finish centering the other 2 wicks, is I forgot to pour in the fragrance. When I looked at my stock, I realized I did not have enough lavender fragrance, which is what I wanted to use. I did not have enough lavender fragrance for the entire experiment. 6 candle jars, 4 different waxes. So instead, I'm going to use mandarin. I bought a 16 ounce, which should be plenty because I only need 1 ounce per fragrance. So I'm going to need a total of 4 ounces. 16 ounces is going to be plenty. And especially as I move forward with different other experiments, I can reuse the same fragrance. The other reason why I chose that is because in this beginning phase, I'm only testing out the wax. I'm not looking to sell this or produce this or make this as part of my candle line. This mandarin was actually discounted because it is being discontinued. Once I finish these initial experiments, I'm not going to need that scent anymore. So it's okay if I use a discounted fragrance oil. I mean, one more here. So that's the beauty of lab notebooks, is you write down all your thoughts, your mistakes. You can always go back, write down why you use a certain thing. For example, I'm going to write down that I'm using the mandarin for that very reason of needing enough to test the full experiment, however, not so critical for further experiments beyond that, and especially with carrying a candle line, so I'm okay using the discontinued fragrance. All right, so all 3 are in place. Gonna set that here. I forgot that when it comes to fragrance, the recommendation from the vendor is to pour in the fragrance while it's at the melt temperature. So I bumped up the temperature back up. It's right now at 185, and I think that's the right temperature I need for the melt temperature for the wax. To figure out how much of the fragrance oil I'm going to put into the wax, I previously mentioned I'm going to use 30 milliliters. I'm going to use a micro pipette. There are other ways that you can do this. You can take a transfer pipette or a dropper and drop it little by little. The problem I have that is each drop is not the same size, and you're going to have to count your drops. And I don't know about you, but I tend to lose track when I count. Make it easy. I bought myself a micro pipette. I actually have 2 sizes. This is the size I need for this particular fragrance oil, and then a disposable tip. Put that on. Make sure that's nice and tight. Open this up. It's at 184, so I'm good there. I'm going to lift this up, and because I need 30 milliliters, I'm going to actually transfer 10 milliliters 3 times. Oh, that smells so good. All right, so to use this, you want to place the tip in the liquid, push that button all the way down so it's basically fully pressed, and then slowly depress the button, and then your liquid will go back up like that. Do it slowly. Don't do it too fast. If you do it too fast, it's too turbulent, and then your oil will shoot up into the pipette, and that's not the best thing you want to do, because then you're going to have to clean up your pipette later. With this method, it's easy because once I'm done, I can just dispose of my tip. So once you have that in your tip, you bring it over here, put it down, And then again, slowly press on the button to deliver the fragrance. Again, do it slowly. Now, there's some pipettes are designed so there's a little bit of liquid left over, especially when you hit the bottom of that button. And then to deliver it completely, you basically press that button all the way through. Some of them don't have that. Just follow the recommendation on the pipette instructions. Okay, this is going to be the second delivery. So what does mandarin smell like? Well, it's an orange or a citrus. So it has that clean, fresh scent. Smells a little bit like laundry, especially clean, citrusy laundry. Smells a little bit like hand soap. I can't wait to burn this so that I can smell what it smells like. And because it's citrusy, it's going to have a very pleasant odor for me. Not for everybody, but for me for sure. All right, so I delivered 3 of these. Take that, put that aside. I'm going to throw that pipette away later. You can also clean it, but the tips are so cheap. They're meant to be disposable, so you can just throw it out. However, if you do plan on cleaning it, you just want to clean it with soapy water. Rinse it very, very well. All right, now that's in there, I want to take a stirring utensil and stir it gently so that I can mix into the fragrance very, very well. When you use a stirring utensil, do not use plastic. That may melt depending on how hot you have the pot at. So do not use plastic. This is actually a wooden bamboo one. And I chose this also because that way, once I'm done using this, I can just throw it out. It's disposable, it's cheap enough. Again, you can use metal, you can clean it. Depending on the wax, it might be a little bit harder to clean. It might clog up your sink system. So I made myself make it easy. Just bought myself a disposable bamboo spoon. All right. Now we have that. Now I'm going to back down the temperature so that I can take it back down to its pour point. I'm going to monitor that. I don't remember. Should be okay. All right, I'm going to leave this here for now because I'm going to do the second batch. So I'm going to reuse that for the second batch. And we're going to wait for that to cool down and then pour it into each of these jars. All right, now the temperature has dropped down to 175. I can take this and transfer into my jars. Now, to do it right, I actually want to measure how much of that wax is going through. And the best way to do that is with my digital scale. Hopefully you remember from earlier that each jar took about 3.32 ounces of wax. I'm going to make it easy. Just go 3.33. Okay. So I'm going to take that off. Put it to the side, wipe that down. I'm gonna use that later. Oh, I can smell the fragrance already. Unplug this so that it's easy for me to pour because the extension cord isn't very far. And there's a little bit of a pour spout, so I'm gonna pour that very gently while I monitor the weight that's being delivered. So I poured some of that into the wick holder. So this is actually not the best way to move forward. I'm going to go get a transfer pipette and do it slowly. Okay. Slightly longer, more cumbersome, but at least I'm going to be able to cleanly transfer all of my wax. This is my first candle that I've ever poured, so it's not the best. That's okay, but lessons learned. I'm going to write that down in my lab notebook so that I know what to do differently next time. I don't know if you remember my Apex method, but one of the last things you want to do after you finish your experiment is review your notes and look through lessons learned. This is definitely one of those lessons learned. Don't pour it straight from the pot. Perhaps maybe other pots are designed so that you can do it much, much easier, but maybe because this candle jar is so small, it made it really hard to pour the wax in. And then as you can see, I don't know if you can see this, but there's actually some wax building up on the side of the wall. That is definitely not a candle that I would be proud of selling or gifting. So luckily this is just an experimental run. And also while I am transferring this over, I'm trying to do it quick so that the pot doesn't cool too much. Then I'd have to reheat it. I'm trying to do this quick, but also note that while I'm doing this, I am slightly making a mess. I already see some wax on the scale. And I am not sure if I'm delivering the right amount of wax over well, and now I'm splattering it. So just be careful. Again, first time doing this, there's a lot of lessons I'm learning here. One thing that I tend to do sometimes, especially if I want to help deliver the wax well, is I actually will take a guide. And so I'm going to use and then pour slowly onto that guide, and the guide will help draw that wax down. That way it's faster delivery, but also helps guide it down. Doesn't make so much of a mess, which I am doing. And because I've taken my time to pour that wax in the pipette, it's actually not, it's giving me different layers. So hopefully that's not going to be an issue. But in terms of appearance, that's not going to be the best thing that I want to have for completing my wax. Yeah, 3.3. So I'm going up to that lip, and I'm already seeing that it's at 3 ounces and it's already at the top of the lip. So maybe I need to stop here, but add a little bit more, 3.3. So the next candle that I'm going to pour, I'm going to use that guide, pour it up to 3 ounces, and then take the pipette and then top it off at the 0.3 mark. All right, so my scale just turned off. I'm going to take this, move it over. You want to set it in a location where there's not going to be a lot of bumping, especially as it's starting to solidify. So I'm going to try really hard to allow this to solidify without bumping. Okay, tapped it, went to the 3.00 mark. I'm seeing a little bit of bubbles just from pouring it in. So before it totally solidifies, I want to pop those bubbles. Otherwise those bubbles are gonna stay, and that will not be ideal. Now, if you're more of an experienced candle maker, please let me know what's the best way to pour your wax. I've seen that there are huge wax warmers with a spout at the bottom. Is that better? I did not purchase that. It's a little bit more expensive, and I wanted to experience smaller batches before I go full blown with larger batches. But if you find that that's a better way to pour your wax and it's well worth the money, please let me know in the comments. I would love to learn from you. Again, newbie candle maker here. Here we go, 3.33. Just want to look at it real quick, make sure there's no bubbles. Okay, set that aside. All right, last one. Oop, a little too much. That's at 3.5, and it's really close to the edge. I'm going to remove that down to 3.33. So with each of these, I think I can probably afford 3.5, but it looks like it's going to be too much close to the edge. So I'm not going to risk it. I'm just going to back it back down to 3.3. With anything that you do in life, the first couple of times that you do things, it's really just trying to get a feel for what you're trying to do, whether that's a new skill or a hobby. Get a feel for it. You don't and should not expect perfection. You're going to make mistakes. But as you do more and more of these, you're going to get more familiar on how to do it correctly, and you're going to know what to do differently. That's where the tips and tricks come into play. That's what experience can bring to you. That's also what's called wisdom. I just finished pouring all of the wax into the 3 prepared jars, and then I moved the jars into a different location where I can make sure the jars solidify and sit undisturbed. It's very critical that I do that because any bump to the jars is going to disturb that wax, and it's going to make craters or different defects into the wax that I don't want. It can be fixed, but it's not what I want to begin with. So I'm going to leave it sit undisturbed. I have other waxes to build, and I have to do the duplicate batch of that paraffin, which I will do. However, for every batch of wax that I make, I need to allow the candle to sit at least 24 hours, cut off the wick, and then reuse the wick centering device. I have two routes that I can go about this. I can make a batch per day, allow it to solidify, reuse that wick centering device, and therefore, if I have a total of 8 experiments, 2 batches for each wax, and I've just made my first one today, then I have 7 more to do. Therefore, I'm not going to be able to finish this first portion of the experiment until a week later. The other option is I can buy more wick centering devices and then make more candles in one day. I think that's what I'm going to do, buy more wick centering devices. If you found this video helpful, please like, share, and subscribe as I share more content as I take scientific practices and methods to build new hobbies, acquire new skills, start a new project, or even a new chapter in your life. Join me on this journey as I share with you how to science your life. Until the next video, be you, be bold, and be elegantly rebellious.
Ne réfléchis pas trop, la vie est courte, mon amour. Ne réfléchis pas trop, la vie est courte. Ne réfléchis pas trop, la vie est courte, mon amour. Ne réfléchis pas trop.